Welcome to Whispers in the Dark. Tonight's story takes us far from the safety of town, out to a lonely clearing where a rigid, God-fearing family has built a cottage right at the tree line. No neighbors, no help, just a wall of ancient woods that never stops whispering. So dim the lights, put your headphones on, and don't look too long into the trees. Now let's begin. I remember the sound of the trees first. Not the wind is too clean a word. This was a constant, rubbing whisper, like 1,000 dry fingers combing through 1,000 dead tongues. Our cottage sat where the cleared land gave up and the forest began, and the forest did not meet us like a neighbor. It met us like a bruise. In the village, they called it the Old Wood. They said it had been there before the first sermons, before the first plow broke the soil, before the first child learned to kneel. They spoke of it the way men speak of the sea, with respect, with fear, with a secret hunger to stare into it too long. My father chose that edge on purpose. He said the village had grown soft, that their ministers spoke with sugar, and their hearts were full of compromise. He said the Lord did not call us to comfort, but to trial. He said we would build a righteous home with righteous hands, away from the gossiping mouths and wandering eyes. My mother did not argue with him in public. My mother rarely argued at all. She wore her obedience like a second skin, because it was safer that way. I was the eldest. I was old enough to understand what leaving meant, and young enough to think understanding made me brave. We left at dawn, with the cart creaking under sacks of grain, tools, linens, and the hard little treasures that survived a life lived narrowly. My brothers walked beside the wheels. My sister held my mother's skirt, and my father drove the oxen with scripture on his tongue. The village watched us go. No one waved. No one spat. No one prayed aloud. They just watched quiet, pale, still, as if they were not watching a family depart, but a candle being carried into a cave. By noon, the road thinned into a track, and by evening it thinned into nothing at all. My father stopped where the earth had been cleared years before by someone else's hands, someone who had either fled or died. There was an old stump field, a crooked fence half swallowed by weeds, and beyond it, the wall of trees. The Old Wood. It stood close enough that the shadows touched the clearing, even before the sun fully lowered. The branches were bare in places, as if the forest had been burned and regrown wrong. Moss furred the trunks like old mold. The air smelled of wet bark and something faintly sweet beneath it, something like bruised fruit left too long in a bowl. We had no neighbor in sight, no smoke, no bell, just us and the breath of the trees. My father smiled as if he'd found Eden. "We will be tested," he said, lifting his face to the darkening canopy. "And we will endure." He said it like a promise. It became a sentence. The first weeks were work, so constant it scraped my thoughts thin. We raised the walls with timber cut from the clearing's edge. We patched the roof with whatever thatch we could manage. My hands were always split, my nails always black, my shoulders always aching. At night, when we lay on our pallets, the cottage made little noises as it settled, wood complaining, rope tightening, thatch shifting. And beneath those ordinary sounds was the old wood, always whispering, always rubbing its dry hands together. My mother prayed when she was not working. Quiet, constant prayers that moved with her like humming. She prayed over the stew. She prayed over the children's hair when she combed it. She prayed when she stitched. She prayed when she stared into the fire with her mouth pressed tight, as if holding back words she could not afford to speak. My father read scripture aloud morning and night, and he made us repeat it until our tongues went numb. He watched my brothers for signs of idleness, my sister for signs of vanity, me for signs of anything he could name with sin. I tried to be everything he wanted, helpful, silent, steady, but I had always been a girl with too much seeing in me. And the wilderness does not like to be watched without watching back. It began small. The hens stopped laying as often. My mother blamed the cold nights. The milk soured faster than it should. My father blamed our poor storage. My little brother woke crying from dreams and said he'd heard someone outside the wall breathing like a dog. My father blamed imagination and beat the fear out of him until he learned to swallow it. Then the goat stopped eating. We had one goat of good size, horned and broad-backed, a mean creature that had survived more than one winter and knew it. My father prized it because it gave milk and because it could breed. He built a pen near the fence line and reinforced it twice, not because he feared the goat escaping, but because he feared wolves taking it. The goat stood one evening with its mouth full of hay and did not chew. Its eyes were open, unblinking, fixed on the trees. My sister, little Mercy, who still had round cheeks and hair that curled no matter how tightly my mother braided it, came to tug my sleeve. "Look," she whispered, "it listens." The goat's ears were forward, its body stiff. The hay drooped from its lips, untouched. I followed its gaze. Between two trees at the clearing's edge, deep in the shade, something pale lay on the forest floor. Not a creature, not a rock, a shape like cloth. I blinked hard, and when my eyes adjusted, it was only a scatter of birch bark and a patch of fungus. Still, a cold went down my spine, as if someone had poured water along the back of my neck. Inside, I told Mercy too sharply. She flinched and looked at me with sudden hurt. I softened my voice. "Go help, Mother. I'll tend to the pen." Mercy ran off, skirts fluttering. I approached the goat, speaking low, trying to sound calm. It did not shift. It did not blink. It did not chew. When I put my hand through the slats to touch its neck, its skin jumped under my fingers as if something beneath it had twitched awake. Then it finally moved, sudden and violent, slamming its horns into the wood. The pen shuddered. The rope knots groaned. The goat bellowed once, a sound that did not belong in any barnyard. It sounded like a man's throat forced through an animal's mouth. I snatched my hand back, heart beating ugly. In the trees, something moved. Not a leaf stirred, no wind came, but the shade shifted, as if someone tall had stepped from one trunk to another. I stared until my eyes watered. Nothing emerged. When I went inside, my mother saw my face and asked what troubled me. I lied, because truth would only earn my father's anger and my mother's fear. I said the goat had been stubborn and the pen needed reinforcing. My father nodded, already thinking of nails and labor, already turning the strange into something he could hammer into place. That night the dreams came. I have always dreamt, but these were not my dreams. These were dreams laid over me like a heavy quilt. In them, I stood at the forest edge with my bare feet in wet grass. The moon was huge and low, a dirty coin caught in branches. From the trees, a voice called my name, my true name, the one my mother whispered only when she kissed my brow. The voice sounded like my mother and like no one at all. It promised warmth, promised ease, promised a place where I would not be measured, and found wanting every hour of my life. I took a step toward it. The grass curled around my ankles like fingers. I woke with my mouth open, as if I'd been speaking back. The air in the cottage was icy. My breath hung in white. My siblings slept in a tangle, faces slack. My father lay rigid with one hand over his chest, as if guarding his own heart from theft. My mother's eyes were open. I realized, with a slow tightening fear, that she had not been asleep. She lay staring at the rafters, unmoving, tears shining at the corners of her eyes. "Mother," I whispered. Her gaze slid to mine so slowly, it felt like a door opening. "Did you hear it?" she breathed. "What?" She swallowed. Her throat worked like she was forcing down stones. "A woman," she said, voice trembling. "Outside, singing." I listened. At first I heard only the trees whispering and the soft crackle of embers. Then, beneath it, so faint I thought it might be my own blood rushing. A sound, not words, not melody, a low, lilting hum, the way one might soothe a child to sleep. It came from beyond the wall. My skin pebbled. It's the wind," I said, though I did not believe it. My mother's mouth trembled into something like a smile, but it was the expression of a drowning woman seeing a hand offered, and not knowing if it belonged to a rescuer or something that wanted to pull her under. "It knows we're here," she whispered. In the morning, my father found footprints. They were in the mud near the fence line, half filled with rainwater. Long, narrow impressions like bare feet, too large to be Mercy's, too light to be a man's. My father's face went hard. "Wolves," he said at once. "The wolves do not leave bare human footprints." My mother crossed herself before remembering we did not do that, and quickly turned the motion into smoothing her apron. My brothers crowded near, eyes wide. My father raised his voice into anger, because anger is easier than fear. "We will not be hunted in our own yard," he said, and took the musket down from its hooks. He marched to the fence, peered into the trees, and fired a shot that made birds burst from the canopy in a frantic black cloud. Nothing cried out, nothing fell, but for a moment, after the echo died, the forest seemed to lean closer. The whispering of the branches became almost laughter. Days later, Mercy went missing. It happened in the time it takes water to boil. My mother had sent her to gather herbs near the garden patch, just behind the cottage where the sun still reached. I was kneading dough on the table. I remember the feel of it sticky, resisting, alive under my palms. I remember my mother humming without realizing it, a nervous hum that matched the one she'd heard at night. Mercy skipped out the door, hair bouncing, and then she was not there. At first, we called her name with the impatient confidence of adults who assume children are simply being contrary. "Mercy." No answer. My mother's voice sharpened. "Mercy, stop playing." "Nothing." My father stormed outside. My brothers followed. I wiped flour from my hands and stepped onto the threshold, squinting at the clearing. The garden patch sat undisturbed. The herb basket lay overturned, stems scattered. In the mud near it, a fresh line where something had been dragged. Not dragged like a sack, dragged like a child who tried to dig her heels in. My mother made a sound like she'd been struck. She ran, skirts flying, and dropped to her knees in the dirt, grabbing at the little torn plants as if she could reassemble her daughter out of crushed leaves. My father seized the musket again and shouted into the trees. We searched until our throats were raw. My brothers went along the fence line. My father pushed into the woods despite my mother's sobbed pleas. I followed at a distance because someone had to, because he was my father, and because if he went alone and did not return, we would be nothing but a mother and children at the edge of a hungry forest. The old woods swallowed sound. The moment we crossed the tree line, the clearing vanished behind branches, and the light changed to a sickly green. The air was colder under the canopy. The ground was soft with rot. Our boots sank silently. My father moved with purpose, eyes scanning, jaw clenched, as if the right amount of righteousness could force the forest to give back what it had taken. "Mercy," he bellowed again. Something answered. It was not Mercy's voice. It was a giggle, high and delighted, from deeper in the woods. My father froze. My blood turned thick. The giggle came again, farther off this time, as if whoever made it had skipped away. My father strode forward, muzzle raised. I caught his sleeve. "Father." He jerked away. "Stay behind me." We pressed on. The giggle led us in a crooked path. Sometimes it sounded close enough to touch. Sometimes it came from the wrong direction entirely. It was always the same giggle, always the same brightness, like a child laughing at a game. Then we found a ribbon, blue cloth, torn and muddy, snagged on a thorn bush. Mercy had worn blue that morning. My mother had stitched it from an old scrap, the only bright thing Mercy owned. My father took it in his fingers, as if it might burn him. His lips moved in silent prayer. He stuffed it into his pocket and moved faster. The woods thickened. The trees grew closer. The air grew heavy, damp with the smell of mushrooms and stagnant water. I noticed then that the whispering of the branches had changed. It wasn't rubbing anymore. It was speaking, not words I could understand, not with my mind, but something in my bones recognized a rhythm of language, a cadence, a murmur meant for ears that were not mine. My father did not seem to hear it, or he refused to. Ahead, the ground sloped down into a shallow hollow, where the trees opened around a stagnant pool. The water was black and still, coated with a film that reflected the sky like oil. At the edge of the pool, something hung from a low branch, a charm, a bundle of twigs tied together with hair. Human hair. My father lifted the musket. "This is devilry," he hissed. My throat tightened. "We should go back." He rounded on me with eyes bright with feverish certainty. "Do you doubt the Lord's protection?" I wanted to say yes. I wanted to say that the Lord's protection felt very far away out here, and something else felt very close. But I swallowed and shook my head. My father stepped toward the charm. As he reached up, the water in the pool rippled, not from wind, from movement beneath. A slow bulge rose under the slick surface, like something large turning. I backed up so quickly, my heel caught a root, and I nearly fell. My father's hand froze inches from the charm. The ripples spread. The bulge moved toward the shore. Then the surface broke, not with a splash, with a quiet, deliberate parting, like lips opening. A pale hand emerged from the black water and gripped the muddy bank. Long fingers, too many joints, skin wrinkled and swollen as if it had soaked for days. Another hand followed, then a head, hair plastered to a skull like weeds. A face lifted, and I saw eyes that were milk white, sightless, yet somehow looking right at me. My lungs locked. The thing pulled itself up with slow, careful strength, water sliding from its body in ropes. Its mouth opened, and the smell that came out was the smell of the inside of a dead animal left in summer heat. My father fired. The sound shattered the woods. Birds screamed up and away. The shot hit the thing square in the chest. It barely moved. It tilted its head as if curious. Then it smiled. Its teeth were small and sharp, and far too many. My father fired again, frantic now. The second shot made the thing jerk, not from pain, but from annoyance, like a man swatting at a fly. Then it moved fast, impossibly fast, closing the distance between us in the blink of an eye. My father raised the musket like a club. The thing grabbed it with those long, wet fingers and wrenched. Wood snapped, metal clanged. My father fell forward. The thing leaned close to his face, and I heard very softly a woman's voice spill from its mouth sweet, amused, intimate. Where is your faith now? My father screamed. I ran. I ran with the kind of speed that does not feel like movement, but like being thrown. Branches whipped my face. Roots clawed at my feet. The whispering turned into a chorus around me, 1,000 murmurs rising and falling like breath. Behind me, my father's screams cut off, as if someone had closed a door. I did not look back. I did not stop until I burst from the tree line into the clearing, lungs burning, vision tunneling. My mother was at the fence, pale and shaking. My brothers stood behind her, clutching each other. When they saw me alone, their faces collapsed. Where is he? My mother whispered, and the question sounded like a prayer and a curse in one. I tried to speak. I could not. My throat was full of cold. Then, from the woods, my father stumbled out. He was alive, but he was not whole. His eyes were wide and unfocused, as if he'd seen something that had burned the meaning out of the world. His hands clutched his chest. His mouth worked soundlessly, lips gray. My mother rushed to him, catching him before he fell. Speak, she begged. In God's name, speak. My father's gaze found mine. For the first time, I saw true fear in him. Not fear of wolves, not fear of famine, not fear of sin. Fear like a man who has looked into a pit and realized the pit looks back. He opened his mouth, and a thin, breathy laugh came out. Not his laugh. A woman. My mother recoiled, as if struck. My father's body shook. His eyes rolled back. He collapsed, heavy as stone. We dragged him inside. My mother wept and prayed and pressed cloth to his forehead. My brothers stood trembling, not daring to touch. Mercy was still gone, but now even my father, our pillar, our certainty, had returned broken. That night he woke screaming. He thrashed on the pallet, hands clawing at his own skin. My mother held him down with all her strength, sobbing his name. My brothers hid their faces. My sister, our youngest left, clung to me, nails digging into my arm. My father's eyes snapped open, and in the firelight they looked wrong, not possessed like in village tailies, with rolling whites and deep voices, wrong in a subtler way, as if something behind them was learning how to wear him. He stared at my mother, and his mouth curled. You left her, he whispered. My mother froze. What? You left her, he said again, voice soft and cutting. You sent her out like meat. My mother shook her head violently. No, I would never. My father's gaze slid to me. You took her, he murmured, and the words hit me like stones. You led her to the trees. I felt my blood drain. I didn't, I whispered. My father's mouth widened into that same wrong smile. Didn't you? He breathed. My mother turned to me, eyes wild with grief, desperate for a culprit, desperate for a story that made sense. No, I said louder, shaking. Mother, no. But the seed had been planted, and in isolation, seeds grow fast. The next days were a slow rotting. My father could not work. He sat by the fire staring, murmuring scripture that turned into nonsense in his mouth. Sometimes he laughed softly to himself. Sometimes he wept without sound. Sometimes he stared at the wall as if listening to something beyond it. My mother grew hollow-eyed, sharp-edged. She watched me as if trying to see through my skin. She watched my hands when I kneaded dough, my mouth when I spoke. When I went to fetch water, she insisted one of my brothers follow. Mercy's absence became a weight in every corner of the cottage. Her cup sat unused. Her small shoes remained by the hearth. My mother could not bring herself to move them, as if leaving them in place might invite her back. Every night my mother sat awake, listening for footsteps, for a child's cry, for anything. And every night the humming came again outside, soft, patient, certain. One morning, my youngest brother Samuel, who had always been quiet, did not wake. He lay on the pallet with his face turned toward the wall. At first, I thought he was still asleep. I touched his shoulder, and his skin was cold. My mother's scream ripped the cottage open. My father did not move. He sat by the fire, gaze fixed on the flames. My mother shook Samuel, sobbing, begging him to wake, to breathe, to blink. He did not. There were no marks on him, no blood, no bruise, just a faint smudge of black under his fingernails, as if he'd been digging in dirt. We buried him near the fence line because the ground farther out was too hard, and the thought of digging toward the forest made my mother gag. My father spoke the words of burial with a voice that sounded like it belonged to someone else. My brothers cried. My mother sobbed until her body shook like a rag in wind. I stood over the grave and felt nothing for a long moment. Then I felt everything at once. Grief, yes, but also rage. Not at God, not at the forest, at the helplessness of it, at how small we were, how easily plucked from the world. As we turned back to the cottage, I looked toward the trees. Between two trunks, deep in shade, I saw a pale figure standing still. Tall, thin, hair like hanging moss. It did not move, but I knew it watched. When I blinked, it was gone. That night, my mother confronted me. She waited until my brothers slept, until my father sat muttering by the dying fire, until the cottage felt like a trapped thing holding its breath. She came to me as I sat on my pallet, hands clenched in my lap. Her face was drawn tight. Her eyes were bloodshot. "You went into the woods with him," she whispered, glancing at my father as if afraid he might hear. "With your father?" "Yes," I said, wary. "And you came back alone," she said, voice trembling with accusation. "He came back," I replied. She shook her head sharply. "Not right." I swallowed, "Mother." Her hand shot out and gripped my wrist. Her fingers were cold and strong. "Tell me," she hissed. And for a moment, she did not look like my mother, but like something starving wearing my mother's face. "Tell me you did not lead Mercy away." I stared at her, stunned. "You cannot believe that," I said. Her eyes filled with tears that did not soften her expression. I don't know what to believe, she whispered. I don't know what you are anymore. The words struck deeper than any slap. I tried to pull away. She tightened her grip. Then we heard it, clearer than ever. A soft knock at the wall. 3 taps, gentle, almost polite. My mother froze. Her grip loosened. We both stared toward the door. Another 3 taps. My father stopped muttering. Slowly, he turned his head toward the sound. His mouth spread into that same wrong smile. She's here, he whispered. My mother's breath hitched. Mercy, she breathed, hope and terror tangled together. The knocking came again, steady, patient. My mother rose, trembling, and took a step toward the door. I grabbed her skirt. Don't, I whispered. Mother, please. She looked down at me, and in her eyes I saw a terrible war. Grief pulling her toward any chance, fear pulling her away. The knocking came again. My father stood. He moved with jerky slowness, like a puppet learning its strings. My mother backed away from him, instinctively. My father reached the door, placed his hand on the latch. My stomach dropped. Father, I said, voice cracking, don't open it. He turned to me, eyes bright in the firelight, and in his gaze was recognition, not of me, but of something in me. Why, he whispered, voice low and intimate. Don't you want her back? The knocking stopped. Silence poured into the cottage, so thick I could taste it. Then from outside, a child's voice, Mercy's voice, sang softly. Not words, just a tune my mother used to hum while braiding her hair. My mother made a broken sound and lunged forward. I held her back with all my strength, nails digging into her arms. She fought me like a wild thing, sobbing Mercy's name, trying to reach the latch. My father's hand tightened. Then the voice outside changed. It deepened, warped, stretched, as if a grown woman tried to pour herself into a child's throat. Let me in. My father's smile widened. My mother stopped struggling. Her eyes went wide with horror, as if some final understanding snapped into place. I yanked her backward. My father pulled the door open. Cold air and the scent of wet earth rushed in. The threshold gaped like a mouth. There was no one there, only darkness, and the clearing lit faintly by moonlight. My father stood in the doorway, staring out. Then, very slowly, he stepped over the threshold. My mother screamed his name. He did not turn back. He walked barefoot into the night, toward the trees, shoulders loose, head tilted as if listening to a lullaby only he could hear. My mother collapsed to her knees, sobbing. I stood frozen, staring at his retreating shape until the darkness swallowed him, and the old wood took him as quietly as it had taken Mercy. We barred the door, we prayed, we wept, and still through the wall came the humming soft, satisfied, endless. The next morning, we found my father's Bible in the mud near the fence. The pages were soaked, stuck together. When I pulled it open, the ink had run, scripture bleeding, into unreadable smears. Tucked between the pages was a small bundle of twigs tied with blue ribbon. Darcy's ribbon. My mother stared at it for a long time without blinking. Then she looked at me, and something in her gaze hardened into certainty. You, she whispered. I shook my head, tears burning my eyes. No. She rose slowly, swaying like a tree about to fall. You bring ruin, she said, voice low and deadly. Since you were born, you have been different. I backed away. Mother, please. You look at the woods like you want them, she hissed. You listen when you should pray. You are proud. You are stubborn. You are. She swallowed, as if the word itself hurt. Marked. I felt my heart hammering. You don't mean that. My mother's face twisted. I mean only what I see, she said. And I see the devil smiling through your eyes. My brothers watched from the corner, silent, terrified. They did not defend me. They did not meet my gaze, because fear wants a target, and I was the easiest one to aim at. That afternoon, my mother made my brothers bind my wrists with rope. They cried while they did it. Their hands shook, but they did it. My mother dragged me to the small shed we'd built for storage and shoved me inside. The air smelled of damp wood and mold. The door slammed. A bar slid into place. Darkness pressed in. At first I screamed. I begged. I promised obedience, prayer, anything. My mother did not answer. As the hours crawled, my throat grew raw. My tears dried into salt on my cheeks. The shed grew colder. The forest's whispering seeped through the cracks. Then, near midnight, I heard footsteps outside. Soft, bare footsteps in wet grass. I held my breath. The bar scraped. The door creaked open. Moonlight spilled in, a pale blade. A figure stood framed in the doorway. My mother. Her hair was loose, wild around her face. Her eyes looked glassy, as if she'd been crying until she ran out of tears, and then kept crying anyway. She stepped inside and shut the door behind her. For a moment, she simply stared at me. Then she sank to her knees in front of me, fingers trembling as they reached for my bound hands. I'm sorry, she whispered. Relief crashed through me so hard, I nearly sobbed. Mother, I breathed, thank God. Her hands paused. Her mouth trembled into that same wrong smile I'd seen on my father. My blood froze. Thank who? She whispered, voice not quite hers. I tried to pull back, but the rope held tight. My mother leaned closer. Her breath smelled of earth. You're so tired, she murmured, and her words felt like fingers stroking my skull. So tired of being good. So tired of being watched. My stomach churned. Mother, stop. Her eyes gleamed in the dark. There's a place, she whispered, where you don't have to kneel. She reached out and pressed her thumb to my lower lip, smearing away the dried salt. I jerked my head away. My mother's smile widened. Stubborn, she breathed, delighted. Yes, that's why it likes you. My heart hammered against my ribs like it wanted out. What are you? I whispered. My mother tilted her head. A door, she said simply. A mouth, a hand. She shifted, and in the moonlight, I saw something move under her skin. thing crawling just beneath the surface. I gagged. My mother's hand slid down to my wrist and gripped hard, nails biting. "Listen," she whispered. "It's calling you." At first, I heard nothing. Then faintly through the wood, through the whispering, through the pounding of my blood, my name, spoken in that sweet, intimate voice from the pool. Not shouted, invited. My mother leaned in, lips near my ear. "You can go to it," she murmured. "Or you can rot here while your brothers starve, and the forest takes what it wants anyway." I shook my head, tears spilling. "I don't want it." My mother's grip tightened until pain flared. "You do," she whispered. "You just don't know you do yet." Then she rose suddenly and moved to the door, yanking it open. Cold air rushed in. Moonlight flooded the shed. Outside, at the edge of the clearing, the trees stood like a congregation of black-robed figures, and between them, barely visible, something pale waited. My mother stepped aside, as if presenting me. "Come," she whispered. I fought the rope, twisting, pulling until my wrists burned. My mother watched with calm amusement. Then she lifted a knife from her apron pocket. Not my mother's knife for peeling apples. A long, thin blade, dark with old stains. My breath hitched. No. My mother knelt and pressed the blade to the rope. For a moment, hope flickered she would cut me free. Instead, she dragged the blade across my palm. Pain exploded, hot, bright. I screamed. Blood welled and ran down my wrist, soaking the rope. My mother sighed, almost blissful. "There," she whispered, an offering. The voice from the trees grew clearer, like it leaned closer. "Yes," it breathed. My mother cut the rope, not to free me, only to ensure I could walk. Her hand clamped around my arm, dragging me out into the clearing. My feet hit cold grass. My blood dripped onto the ground, darkening the blades. The forest whispered louder, excited. My mother pulled me forward, step by step. My mind screamed to run, but my body felt heavy, as if the air itself thickened with each stride toward the trees. At the fence line, my mother stopped. She turned to me and smiled, and her face, my mother's beloved face, looked strange and wrong, stretched over a hunger that was not human. "Go on," she whispered. "It's waiting." I staggered, clutching my bleeding hand to my chest. The pale figure between the trunks shifted. It stepped forward. Moonlight touched it, and I saw, just for a heartbeat, a woman-shaped thing, tall and thin, hair like tangled weeds, skin like paper over bone. Its eyes were black pits. Its mouth was too wide, and yet its voice was gentle. "Poor child," it murmured, "so burdened." My knees nearly buckled. The thing lifted a hand, long fingers, delicate as twigs, and beckoned. Behind me, my mother's breath came fast with anticipation. The forest's whispering swelled into a chorus, as if the trees themselves leaned in to watch. I looked back toward the cottage. In the doorway, my brothers stood. Their faces were pale, streaked with tears. They did not move. They did not call my name. only watched, helpless, terrified, as if they'd already decided I was lost. Something in me snapped. Not hope, not faith, a different kind of fire. Rage again. The same rage I'd felt at Samuel's grave. Not rage at my family. Not even rage at the forest. Rage at being used, pushed, offered, blamed. I turned back to the thing in the trees and lifted my bleeding palm. My blood shone black in the moonlight. The thing smiled. Yes, it whispered, give. I took a step forward, then another. My mother's breath hitched behind me. The thing's voice coiled around my ears like smoke. Just come, it murmured. Just cross. I reached the tree line. The air under the canopy felt colder, thicker, as if I stepped into another world. The thing leaned close, its face inches from mine. I smelled earth, rot, and something sweet underneath, bruised fruit. Its fingers brushed my cheek. My skin crawled. Good girl, it whispered. And then, with a sudden clarity so sharp it hurt, I understood. This was not a bargain. This was not a gift. This was hunger dressed as kindness. I stepped forward one more pace, close enough that its shadow fell over my feet. And then I did the only thing I could think to do. I slapped my bleeding palm against its face. My blood smeared across its skin. For an instant, it froze. Its mouth opened in shock, not pain, but surprise, as if it had not expected defiance. I whispered, voice shaking, if you want me, you'll have to take me. Then I ran. I ran back into the clearing, with a scream tearing out of me. My mother shrieked and lunged, grabbing at my hair, my sleeve. I tore away, stumbling, blood slicking my hand. Behind me, the thing hissed. The sound was not human. It was the sound of wet wood splitting. The forest erupted with movement, shadows shifting, branches swaying though there was no wind, whispering turning into a furious roar. My mother's hands clamped onto my shoulders and spun me around. Her eyes were wild, her mouth twisted. You ruin everything, she screamed, and her voice cracked into something deeper. She raised the knife. I threw my arms up. The blade flashed. Pain flared across my forearm as it sliced shallow, but enough to spill more blood. My mother's face contorted with frustration. She struck again, frantic now, as if something inside her demanded this and would not accept refusal. I shoved her. She stumbled back, tripping over a root. She fell hard, knife skittering away into the grass. For a heartbeat, she lay there staring up at me, hair spread like a dark halo. In that moment, her eyes cleared. Just for a moment, she looked like my mother again, terrified, broken, human. Run, she whispered, voice small. Then her gaze snapped past me, toward the tree line. Her face twisted into horror. I turned. The pale thing had stepped fully into the clearing. It moved like smoke given bones. It did not hurry. It did not need to. The air around it seemed to bend, thickening, pulling. My legs trembled. My mother scrambled backward, sobbing. The thing's head tilted, and it looked at her with something like amusement. "You offered," it whispered. My mother shook her head, mouth opening and closing. The thing reached out. Its long fingers closed around my mother's ankle. My mother screamed, not in anger, not in accusation, in pure animal terror. She clawed at the grass, trying to pull herself away. But the thing's grip was iron. It dragged her toward the trees with slow certainty. My mother's nails tore, dirt flew. Her screams ripped the night. I stood frozen, watching as the old wood claimed her. She reached a hand toward me, fingers outstretched. "Please," she sobbed. I took a step forward. Then the thing looked at me, and in its black eyes I saw mercy. Not alive, not whole. A flash of blue ribbon, a small hand, a mouth opened in a silent cry. A warning. I stopped. My mother's fingers scraped the grass, then disappeared under the shadow of the trees. The forest swallowed her screams like it had swallowed my father's. Silence crashed down. The thing stood at the tree line, half in shadow, half in moonlight. It lifted its head as if listening. Then it smiled again, slow, satisfied. "You will come," it whispered, not a threat, a promise. Then it stepped backward into the old wood and vanished. I stood trembling in the clearing, blood on my hands, tears on my face, and the sudden crushing realization that I was alone in a way I had never been alone before. Behind me, the cottage door creaked. My brothers stood there, faces pale, eyes huge. They stared at me as if I were a stranger, as if they were waiting to see what I would become. I looked at them and felt something inside me go quiet. Not kindness, not innocence, just quiet. "I didn't take her," I whispered, though I wasn't sure who I was trying to convince anymore. My brothers didn't speak. They only backed away slowly into the cottage, and they shut the door. The bar slid into place. I stood outside, listening to the wood scrape, listening to the final seal of family. Then I heard the humming again, not from the cottage, from the trees, soft, patient, certain. I turned toward the old wood. The night air was cold enough to bite. The stars looked sharp, indifferent. The clearing looked smaller than it ever had, as if the forest had already begun to close around it. I could have pounded on the door. I could have begged, but I knew, with a deep and terrible certainty, that even if they let me in, the old wood would still be there, whispering, waiting, hungry. And I knew something else too, something that made my stomach twist. The thing had touched me. It had tasted my blood. It had looked into me and recognized something. I backed toward the fence, toward the open field beyond, where the land rolled away into darkness. If I could reach the village by dawn, if I could. A twig snapped behind me. I whipped around. Between two trunks, deeper in the shade, a small figure stood. A child, hair tangled, bare feet, a blue ribbon tied around the wrist. My heart stopped. "Mercy," I breathed. The child lifted its head. Its face was mercy, but its eyes were black pits like the thing, and when it smiled, the mouth was too wide. "Come play," it whispered. Voice Mercy's voice stretched over something hungry. My legs locked. The child took one step out of the trees. The humming swelled. The whispering rose, excited. I realized then there would be no running to the village, no clean escape. The old wood had decided it would either take me with claws or with kindness. I raised my bleeding hands, trembling, and backed toward the fence. The child tilted its head, curious, and in that gesture, it looked so much like mercy that grief ripped through me anew. Why, I choked. The child's smile widened. "Because you heard us," it whispered, "and now you can't stop." Then from deeper in the woods, the woman's voice came again, soft as a lullaby. "Don't be afraid," it murmured. "You are never safe." The trees whispered like 1,000 praying mouths. The moon hung low like an eye, and I stood at the edge of the world, realizing that faith had brought us here, but something else had been waiting long before we arrived. I don't know how long I stood there. Minutes, hours, a lifetime. I only know that when my knees finally buckled and I sank into the cold grass, the humming continued, endless, patient, certain. And in the cottage behind me, my brothers did not open the door. They did not call my name. They prayed, I think. They prayed hard. But prayer is only sound, and the old wood has always loved sound. If you made it to the end of that nightmare, thank you for listening. If you want more horror stories where the dark doesn't just surround you, it learns you, make sure you're subscribed. Good night.
Whispers of a love so true, painting dreams of me and you. And I'll hold you close in this moment.